Hi, welcome back. Right now we're going to talk about the story of Cinderella. And this is not the Disney version. This is the original version. In the original version, we have a fairy, what is it called?
Fairy godmother.
Fairy godmother. We have a prince who rescues Cinderella. Cinderella in this story doesn't need rescuing. What she needs is somebody to see her for herself. In the Disney version, we don't have a mom, but in this original version, we have a mother. Now, she's not very long for the story. As I read this to you, I want you to take notes on what motivates the characters. Each character, the father, the mother, the stepmother, her daughters, so the stepsisters, what motivates Cinderella, and what motivates the prince. Once again, this is the original Brothers Grimm version. I also want you to think about what morals there are to this story. What is it teaching? And what symbols you can find in it. There was once a rich man whose wife lay sick. And when she felt her end drawing near, she called to her only daughter to come near her bed and said, "Dear child, be good and pious, and God will always take care of you. And I will look down upon you from heaven and will be there with you." And then she closed her eyes and died. So perhaps that's why Disney doesn't include her, because she's, a part actor here. But what motivates this mother? She wants the best for her daughter. And she's telling her to live a good life. The maiden, and remember in these fairy tales, we often have pagan references to maiden, mother, and crone. Non-married, virginal, young. A maiden means young. A mother, someone who's reproduced. And a crone is an older person who can't reproduce anymore, an older woman. And this is the divine feminine. The maiden went every day to her mother's grave and wept, and was always pious and good. When the winter came, the snow covered her grave with a white covering, and when the sun came in the early spring and melted away, the man took to himself another wife. So we have to ask ourselves, you've got a rich dad who gets married immediately, not even a year has gone by. What would be motivating him? You think about that. The new wife brought 2 daughters home with her, and they were beautiful and fair in appearance. Fair means beautiful in appearance, but at heart they were black and they were ugly. So here we have the daughters who at heart are black and ugly. You've probably met a few people like that, right? They look nice, but inside they're evil personified. And then began very evil times for the poor stepdaughter, meaning Cinderella. From the stepmother, now she's become the stepdaughter. By the way, Cinderella isn't even her name. Cinderella just means dirty. Can you imagine if your father got married to a person, or your mother, and the person that your parent married started calling you dirty? And this is a stepdaughter speaking. Is this the stupid creature is the stupid creature to sit in the same room with us? So I want you to keep a list of the names that Cinderella gets called in the story. She's already been called stepdaughter. Now she's a stupid creature. Those who eat food must earn it. She is nothing but a kitchen maid. Okay, so think about what the background might be from the stepmother and these daughters. What social class would they come from? Why would the stepmother marry a wealthy man when he's hardly had time to grieve his first wife at all? They took away her pretty dresses and put on her an old gray kirtle and gave her wooden shoes to wear. So the daughters steal Cinderella's clothing. Where do you think they got the clothing that they put on her? Because obviously the wooden shoes and the old gray kirtle was not Cinderella's. Just look now at the proud princess, how she is decked out, cried they, laughing. And then they sent her into the kitchen. And there Cinderella was obliged to do heavy work from morning to night, get up early in the morning, draw water, make the fires, cook and wash. Besides that, the sisters did their utmost to torment her, mocking her and strewing peas and lentils among the ashes and setting her to pick them up. In the evenings, when she was quite tired out with her hard day's work, she had no bed to lie on, but was obliged to rest on the hearth among the cinders. And cinders are the ashes from a fire, right? Why wouldn't she have a bed? Her father is wealthy. Why would she become the maid in the house? Not the maiden, but the maid. And you might ask yourself, where the hell is the father? What are his priorities? And because she always looked dusty and dirty as if she had slept in the cinders, why? Because she did, they named her Cinderella. It happened one day that the father went to the fair. Now, back at this time, a fair was not little rides and booths and everything. Basically, it was a rendezvous where people came from all over to sell goods. And it only happened once or maybe twice a year. And so that was like the equivalent of us hopping on the internet and shopping, or back before the demise of malls, going to a mall and having all sorts of variety. And the father asked his two stepdaughters what he should bring back for them. Fine clothes, said one. Pearls and jewels, said the other. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I asked my parents asked me what did I want when they were going somewhere, or even for Christmas. When I was in 3rd grade, my parents asked me, what do you want for Christmas? And I told them, I want a pocket dictionary. And lo and behold, they brought me a pocket dictionary. But if I had told them pearls and jewels, they would have looked at me and wondered if I was feeling a little bit sick or something, because that was not possible. And then he said to Cinderella, but what will you have, Cinderella? The first twig, father, that strikes against your hat on the way home, that's what I should like you to bring me. Now, a twig, often in my mind, is something without leaves, but she's not asking for that. She's asking that as he rides back home through the fertile lands, that he brings her back a flowering small piece of a tree. So he bought for the two stepdaughters fine clothes, pearls, and jewels. And on his way back, as he rode through a green lane, a hazel twig struck against his hat, and he broke it off and carried it home with him. It's like on the bad side of the shopping list, you know what I mean? And when he reached home, he gave the stepdaughters what they wished for, and to Cinderella he gave the hazel twig. And I want you to think about what hazel has been used for in human history, all right? Cinderella, she thanked him and went to her mother's grave and planted the twig there, weeping so bitterly that the tears fell upon it, and they watered it, and it flourished, and it became a fine tree. So here we have a lot going on symbolically. We've got the mother's grave, which has now become fertilizer for a tree that is watered by Cinderella feeling bad about the loss of her mother, and becomes her mother's grave becomes fertility, and the tree grows up. Cinderella went to it 3 times a day and wept, and she prayed, and each time a white bird rose up from the tree as if she uttered any wish, the bird brought her whatever she had wished for. So now we have a tree growing from the mother's grave and a white bird that grants Cinderella her every wish. Which character do you think the Disney character was modeled on? Now it came to pass that the king ordained a festival that should last for 3 days, to which all the beautiful young women of that country were bidden. Why? Because it's a beauty pageant, so that the king's son might choose a bride from among them. When the 2 stepdaughters heard that they were bidden to appear, they felt very pleased, and they called out to Cinderella and said, "Comb our hair, brush our shoes, and make our buckles fast. We're going to the wedding feast at the king's castle." So these 2 daughters have turned Cinderella into a servant, and the buckles they're talking about probably had to do with being strapped in the back so that they can have a smaller waist and bigger bosoms. When she heard this, Cinderella could not help crying, for she too would have liked to go to the dance, and she begged her stepmother to allow her. Now listen to how the stepmother speaks to Cinderella. And oftentimes in families, not just in combined or blended families, but we end up with a person who is picked on by everybody. And that person is called a scapegoat. And this is a tradition that literally goes back for thousands of years, back into Old Testament times. What you would do in order to pay for sins for the entire people is sacrifice a goat. So you say that that goat bears all of the sins of the people. So the stepmother says, "What? You, Cinderella? Can you imagine? What? You dirty little thing? In all your dust and dirt, you want to go to the festival? You have no dress and no shoes. You want to dance? Why doesn't Cinderella have any shoes and dresses?" But as she persisted in asking, at last the stepmother said, "I have strewed a dish full of lentils into the ashes, and if you can pick them all up again in 2 hours, you may go with us." If you're not familiar with lentils, it's a grain that is teeny tiny. Imagine if you have your fire pit out back, or you actually have a fireplace in your house, if someone threw food in there and said, "Pick it out, and then you can go." What's going to happen while you're touching all those ashes? Then the maiden went to the back door that led into the garden and called out, "O gentle doves, O turtle doves, and all the birds that be, come and pick the lentils that in the ashes lie. Come up and pick them for me. The good must be put in the dish, the bad you may eat if you wish." And then there came to the kitchen window 2 doves. I want you to think about what doves represent in Western culture. And after them, some turtle doves. And at last a crowd of all the birds under heaven, chirping and fluttering. Now turtle doves, remember that 12 Days of Christmas, my true love gave to me 2 turtle doves. Turtle doves have been used in Western culture as a symbol of fidelity for life because they mate for life. And all the birds came chirping and fluttering, and they alighted among the ashes, and the doves nodded with their heads and began to pick, peck. And then all the others began to pick, peck, and put all the good grains into the dish, and before an hour was over, all was done, and they flew away. Then the maiden brought the dish to her stepmother, feeling joyful and thinking now she could go to the feast. But the stepmother said, "No, Cinderella, you have no proper clothes, you would not know how to dance, and you would be laughed at." So think about what motivates the stepmother. Could it be pride? Could it be social status? And when Cinderella cried for disappointment, the stepmother said, "If you can pick 2 dishes full of lentils out of the ashes, nice and clean, you shall go with us." And she was thinking to herself, that is not possible. When she had strewed 2 dishes full of lentils among the ashes, which talk about conspicuous consumption, right? How many of you just throw away good food into your burn pile or into your fireplace? When she had strewed 2 dishes full of lentils among the ashes, the maiden went through the back door into the garden and cried, "O gentle doves, O turtle doves, and all the birds that be the lentils that in the ashes lie, come and pick up for me. The good must be put up in the dish, the bad you may eat, if you wish." So there came to the kitchen window 2 doves, and then some turtle doves, and at last a crowd of all the other birds under heaven chirping and fluttering, and they alighted among the ashes, and the doves nodded with their heads and began to pick, peck. Then all the others began to pick, peck, and put all the good grains into the dish, and before half an hour was over, it was all done, and they flew away. Then the maiden took the dishes to the stepmother, feeling joyful, and thinking that now she should go with them to the feast. But she said, "All this is no good to you. You cannot come with us. You have no proper clothes. You cannot dance, and you would put us to shame." That's some kind words from a parent, right? You have to stay home because if we were out in public, you'd embarrass us. Then she turned her back on poor Cinderella and made haste to set out with her 2 proud daughters. And as there was no one left in the house, because why? The dad has gone with them, Cinderella went to her mother's grave under the hazel bush and cried, little tree, shake over me that silver and gold may come down and cover me." Then the bird threw down a dress of gold and silver and a pair of slippers embroidered with silk and silver. And in all haste she put on the dress and she went to the festival. But her stepmother and sisters did not know her and thought she must be a foreign princess because she looked so beautiful in her golden dress. Of Cinderella they never thought at all and supposed she was sitting at home and picking the lentils out of the ashes. The king's son came to meet her and took her by the hand and danced with her, and he refused to stand up with anyone else so that he might not be obliged to let go of her hand. And when anyone came to claim her hand, she answered, "She is my partner." Okay. She is my partner. I want you to think about that. When people join in business and they're partners, that means that there's a 50-50 share typically. When people join in marriage as partners, it should be 50-50. You don't have the hierarchy. Why? Because one partner is equal to the other partner. And when the evening came, she wanted to go home. But the prince said he'd go with her to take care of her, for he wanted to see where the beautiful maiden lived. Okay, so he's trying to be that paternalistic, standard masculine person, right? She doesn't need that. She's not waiting because she's on a time clock like in the Disney version. At midnight, everything turns back into pumpkins, things like that. No, she wants to leave. So she escaped him and jumped into the pigeon house. I don't know how many of you have ever been inside a pigeon house, but my good friend Art raises pigeons. And imagine what it looks like inside. One has to scrape the guano off of the floor, off of the shelves, off of the perches, periodically, because it gets pretty messy. So think about going to the prom in a beautiful dress or in a tuxedo and then playing hide and seek inside a pigeon house and see what will happen. Then the prince waited until the father came home and told him the strange maiden had jumped into the pigeon house. And her dad thought to himself, it surely cannot be Cinderella. Okay, so you've got a person inside a pigeon house. How do you find out if they're inside? In normal life, you would open the door. Just open a door. But this is a fairy tale. And so see how the father and the prince problem solve. And he called for axes and hatchets and had the pigeon house cut all the way down. But there was no one in it. And when they entered the house, there sat Cinderella in her dirty clothes among the cinders, and a little oil lamp burnt dimly in the chimney. For Cinderella had been very quick, and had jumped out of the pigeon house again, and had run to the hazel bush, and there she had taken off her beautiful dress and laid it on the grave, and the bird had carried it away again, and then she put on her little gray kirtle, and had sat down in the kitchen among the cinders. Now the next day, when the festival began anew, and the parents and stepsisters had gone to it, Cinderella went to the hazel bush and cried out, little tree, shake over me, that silver and gold may come down and cover me. Then the bird cast down a still more splendid dress than the day before, and when she appeared in it among the guests, everyone was astonished at her beauty. The prince had been waiting until she came, and he took her hand and danced with her alone. And when anyone else came to invite her, he said, she is my partner. And when the evening came, she wanted to go home. And the prince followed her, for he wanted to see what house she belonged at. But she broke away from him and ran into the garden at the back of the house, and there stood a fine large tree bearing splendid pears. She leapt as lightly as a squirrel among the branches, and the prince did not know what had become of her. So he waited until the father came home and told him that the strange maiden had rushed from him and that he thought she had gone up into the pear tree. And the father thought to himself, time number 2, it surely cannot be Cinderella. Okay, and how do you make sure if someone's in a tree or not? Well, look. You might want to look. And what are pear trees good for? Food. So they're very valuable. It takes a long time before they start producing. And so the father called for an axe, and he felled the tree. He cut the tree down, and there was no one in it. Can you imagine if you were hiding up in a tree and your parent came home and was like, get the chainsaw. We'll find out if he's up there. We'll find out if she's up there. And you cut down a whole tree. That's pretty dangerous. And when they went into the kitchen, there sat Cinderella among the cinders as usual, for she had got down on the other side of the tree and had taken back her beautiful clothes to the bird on the hazel bush and had put on her old gray kirtle again. Now on the 3rd day, when the parents and the stepchildren had set off, Cinderella went again to her mother's grave and said to the tree, little tree, shake over me that silver and gold may come down and cover me. And then the bird cast down a dress, the likes of which had never been seen for splendor and brilliancy, and slippers that were of gold. There are no glass slippers in the original version, okay? Gold slippers. And when she appeared in this dress at the feast, nobody knew what to say for wonderment. The prince danced with her alone, and if anyone else asked her, he answered, she is my partner. And when it was evening, not because she has a deadline, she's tired, she wants to go home. And think about, what is it that Cinderella really wants? She keeps getting covered up, and her body covered up, and people can't recognize her. What does she really long for? Even though she's the most beautiful princess, what is it that she truly wants someone to see? And the prince was about to go with her when she ran past him so quickly he could not follow her. Ah, but the prince has been thinking about this. But he had laid a plan and had caused all the steps to be spread with pitch, which is another word for tar. Pitch is used to make boats impermeable to water. And it's black, all right, and sticky. So that as she rushed down the stairs, the left shoe of the maiden remained sticking in it. The prince picked it up and saw that it was of gold and very small and slender. Now, back in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, not just in Western culture, but in Asian culture as well, there's some sort of weird foot fetish going on where women are supposed to have small feet. And this is carried over to this day. Now, in China and in Japan, they actually bound women's feet so that the toes would have to stick under and it would disfigure their feet, but they'd have nice small feet. And this bias lasts today where maybe you or ask other women what they think of their feet, and many will say, oh, they're so ugly. Their feet, all right? But the next morning he went to the father, so the king, and told him that none should be his bride save the one whose foot fit the golden shoe. Then the two stepsisters were very glad because they had pretty feet. The eldest went into her room to try on the shoe, and her mother stood by. But when she could not get her great toe into it, for the shoe was too small. Okay, so your great toe is, and I won't try to lift my leg up here for you to see, because I am wearing sandals, but it's your big toe. So this shoe is so small she can't even get her big toe into it, all right? And what's any caring mother going to do to solve this problem? Remember, it's a fairy tale. So her mother handed her a knife and said, cut the toe off. When you are a queen, you'll never have to go on foot. So the girl cut her toe off, squeezed her foot in the shoe, concealed the pain, can't you see her walking, and went down to the prince, and then he took her with him on his horse as his bride, and he rode off. Do you want the story to end here? Because the prince has got a bride without any big toes. They had to pass by the grave, and there sat the two pigeons on the hazel bush and cried, there they go! There they go! There is blood on her shoe! The shoe is too small, not the right bride at all. And so then the prince looked at her shoe and saw the blood flowing out of it, and he turned his horse around and took the false bride home again, saying she was not the right one and that the other sister must try on the shoe. So she went into her room to do so and got her toes comfortably in. Except her heel was too large. So, as any caring mother would, her mother handed her the knife, saying, cut a piece off your heel. When you are queen, you'll never have to go on foot. So the girl cut a piece off her heel and thrust her foot into the shoe, concealed the pain, and walked down to the prince, who took his bride before him on his horse, and he rode off again. And now we have to cue the music. Whoa! And it's a beautiful, happy ending. Not so fast. When they passed by the hazel bush, the two pigeons sat there and cried, there they go! There they go! There's blood on her shoe! The shoe is too small. Not the right bride at all. And then the prince looked at her foot and saw how the blood was flowing from the shoe and staining the white stocking. And he turned his horse around and brought the false bride home again. This is not the right one, he said. Have you no other daughter? What do you think the dad's going to say? What would any good dad say? This dad says, no, only my dad left behind her a little stunted Cinderella. It's impossible that she can be the bride. So now Cinderella is little and stunted, right? But the king's son ordered her to be sent for. But the stepmother said, oh no, she's much too dirty. I could not let her be seen. But the prince would have her fetched, and so Cinderella had to appear. First, she washed her face and hands quite clean and went in and curtsied to the prince, who held out her golden shoe. And then she sat down on a stool. I hope they cleaned that shoe, right? And she drew her foot out of the heavy wooden shoe and slipped it into the golden one, which fitted it perfectly. I wonder why it's a perfect fit. And when she stood up, the prince looked in her face, and he knew again the beautiful maiden that had danced with him, and he cried, "This is the right bride." So we have all this foot fetish stuff going on, but the prince finally, he's been dancing with her for 3 evenings, right? Finally, he looked in her face. Now, for you women out there, how many times have you interacted with men and they're not looking in your eyes, they're looking at your chest? I've seen some women wear shirts with an arrow and words over their breasts that say, "My eyes are up here." Finally, he looks her in the face and says, "This is the right bride." The stepmother and the 2 sisters were thunderstruck, and they grew pale with anger. But he put Cinderella before him on his horse, and he rode off. And as they passed the hazel bush, the 2 white pigeons cried out, "There they go, there they go. No blood on her shoe. The shoe's not too small. The right bride is she, after all." And now that could be the end of the story, but who is the villain? And there are multiple villains in this story. I mean, because the father lets his daughter from his first marriage be treated like she is an animal. Worse than an animal, right? A slave. Certainly not the mother who has died. She's not the villain. The stepsisters are horrible. We've got the stepmother who is probably the primary villain, because besides money, this father is only motivated by having a relationship with the stepmother. I've known many people in my life who have relationships, and when the man leaves and gets together with somebody else, no longer does their biological child matter. They're happy to pay all the money that they can for the children that are already there with their new person that they're with, and they don't care. Not a lot has changed in many ways. Okay? And when they had thus cried, those pigeons, they came flying after, and they perched on Cinderella's shoulders, one on the right and the other on the left, and so they remained. And when a wedding with the prince was appointed to be held, the false sisters came hoping to curry favor and to take part in the festivities, because now we have a relative who's in power. So as the bridal procession went to the church, the eldest walked on the right side and the younger on the left, and the pigeons picked out an eye of each of them. And as they returned, the elder one was on the left side and the younger on the right, and the pigeons picked out the other eye of each of them. And so they were condemned to go blind for the rest of their days because of their wickedness and falsehood. I hope you enjoyed the story. Go back and think about what the birds can represent. Go back and think about what the shoes can represent. Go back and think about what this phrase, "looked in her face," can represent. Thank you.